2020 marked the beginning of precarious times. Now, at the mention of 2020, you might be reminded of the global pandemic that essentially shut down the economy and society alike. Or maybe you're reminded of the mass social unrest that surrounded the presidential election. Or maybe even the vision of protests come to mind as tensions charged throughout the country. But for us, 2020 marked the beginning of what would become an ongoing identity crisis. Let me explain. With the widespread quarantine afoot, teenagers like us were confined to our bedrooms with nothing more than our phones to keep us amused. What began as an innocent engagement with social media as a means of entertainment soon evolved into a pernicious association of self-identity with the internet.
Social media has become not just a platform for additional entertainment, but rather a whole new world in convergence with our physical world, acting as a conduit in our new interconnected society where the price of residence in this community is the sacrifice and exchange of our self-identity. It was after reflection that we realized the deeper effects that social media had on our self-identity that were not typically talked about. And with time, we became directly aware of the direct correlation constant social media usage had on the ways we presented ourselves and the ways we perceived ourselves.
We began to carry influential online behaviors into our reality, unwittingly becoming versions of ourselves that reflected our online engagement rather than our genuine identities. Ultimately, social media usage amongst people of young ages has hindered crucial stages of self-exploration, effectively supplanting individual growth with the adoption of fabricated identities perpetuated and validated through social media.
Without a clear understanding of what self-identity really is, we began to cater our humor and language to social media, creating this bubble of a false reality consisting of a fabricated sense of who we can be to stand out but not excluded out. The standards which social media have set have subconsciously become the baseline of our judgment, and we often surpass these personal intentions and leave these judgments and decisions for the media's eyes to make. Let me give you an example of this fabrication of identity that comes with social media. In 2020, I was obsessed with finding an aesthetic that would really suit me and I could associate with the media. And so I began to search all across the media, all social platforms, and I became committed to exchanging my entire wardrobe, my personality, my hobbies for this very title of aesthetic. And so I settled upon the aesthetic of a dark girl academia. Now, I wanted to be that girl who wore tweed blazers and turtlenecks and plaid skirts, listen to classical music, which is very realistic, I know. But really, that is where the issue is spanning from. I was never into this gothic, dark aesthetic, but I was really into the romanticized image of this aesthetic that social media users had perpetuated. And so, the more I committed myself to this aesthetic, the more detached I became from my personal reality. And so, if we really thought about it, could I really have fit into this aesthetic or title, or was I just finding an easy outlet and solution that would provide me with a fabricated sense of belonging?
Through this example, it is clear that the constant evolution of these aesthetics leads to a lack of stability in how we define ourselves. By living in this virtual world of overconsumption, we end up under-consuming the real world, leading to a loss of personal transformation based on real-world experiences. We often forget that the videos that we see on our For You pages are also seen by millions of other people around the world, leading to a false sense of uniqueness. In fact, there are over 80 million active users on TikTok, with over 60% of them being Gen Zers. By more and more of us endorsing these media trends, whether they be oral phrases or clothing styles, we begin to become undistinguishable from the masses. One of the most obvious examples of this is the overuse of the all too familiar word, slay. Now, many of you have heard this word before, I'm sure, in any capacity, whether it be that was so slay or we're such slayers. But ultimately, the reality is that this word perpetuated from social media, leading to a lack of individuality amongst society.
We believe that what social media has deemed to be unique is the one and for all standard for uniqueness. And we also forget that the more people who view this content, the greater this pool of uniqueness spans out, essentially making it the new basic and convoluting our cycle of what's in and what's out. causing our never-found sense of permanence. We are being enclosed in this cycle of swapping our humor, language, personality for the very title and the spike in views in mere 30-second videos, which have perpetuated our disassociativity in our society. To give you a perspective on this distance away from our personal truths and our identity, these are some phrases that we've all heard within the media, such as, "Oh, today I want to be a granola girl. Tomorrow I want to be a clean girl. I'm giving a bombastic side eye right now. I'm really a slayer right now." These are phrases that we've all heard commonly throughout the media, except this time we've extrapolated them into our own personal language. And so the issue here is really that we don't know how to tune into our most authentic selves, but rather we latch onto these micro-labels, these romanticized image, and we make them our own. So if we're able to transform our identity over short 30-second videos, how long is this so-called identity going to stay with us until we get bored, move on once again, and find a new aesthetic, and repeat the cycle of, who do I want to be today?
One thing that social media has allowed for is the tricking of our subconscious minds into believing that we are something we're not. To really understand this concept, I would like to take you back to the cultural phenomena commonly regarded as Draco talk. Now, while many of you may not have heard of Draco talk, you prove our point in that social media has become a separate sphere of society completely severed from the real, tangible world. Because with over 29.6 billion views on TikTok, I wasn't lying when I said that Draco talk was truly a cultural phenomenon. Essentially, within the secret society of TikTok, there was a mass revival of an obsession with Harry Potter, specifically revolving around the character Draco Malfoy. And with this growing obsession came the desire of many to identify as Slytherins. As this kind of content proliferated across social media apps, people began to show symptoms of a lack and loss of self-identity, myself included. Growing up, I had always considered myself to be a Gryffindor, always the group leader, never afraid to speak my mind, and always fiercely loyal to my friends. However, when Draco talk rolled around, I found myself entering an identity crisis as I fell into the trap of falsely self-identifying as a Slytherin, as did many others. And this was largely a result of the echo chamber of a Slytherin-enforcing agenda that surrounded me on social media.
Now, social media inherently is not a bad thing. Social media has provided us with numerous benefits to our society, ranging from increased globalization to communication to news. However, it is rather the constant interconnectedness and coupled with the content that users perpetuate that end up causing these detrimental effects. A very notable subsection of the social media universe is the formation of fandoms. Now, fandoms are online groups which users create through a shared interest in a book or a fictional character or fictional world or celebrity. And these fandoms will make short videos called edits, which outline their interest and love for these fictional worlds or characters. Now, this content may not seem harmful at face value. However, they reinforce behaviors of obsession with that fictional character or world and consequently create an unhealthy association of self with that fandom. This notion is often referred to as a parasocial relationship. Members in these fandoms who are part of parasocial relationships have become entrenched in these bonds and lives of these fictional characters and worlds, as they use this as a means of connection to their social world or real world. And this bond begins to deepen as it becomes and increases as a fabricated mental relationship, which poses as a maladaptive mechanism of escapism. So instead of dealing with real-world issues in an introspective way, teenagers will seek comfort in social media, their phones, and often these fandoms. However, in actuality, by doing this, they are only stymieing their self-exploration of their feelings, thoughts, and ideas in the real world.
Now, I'd like to go back to the idea that social media promotes a false sense of identity. To truly paint this picture, I'd like to tell you a little bit about my best friend. Now, though I love her to death, she truly is the epitome of a teenager who lacks any cemented notion of self-identity. Consequently, she latches on to things perpetuated via social media, often confusing things that she finds cool or attractive with her genuine self-perception. One of the most jarring comments that she made to me was after she sent me a TikTok edit of Patrick Bateman, yes, the serial killer from American Psycho, and told me, and I quote, "I am so him." Now, while at first I laughed at her utter delusions, I soon realized that this comment reflected a much deeper societal issue. Because as I was scrolling through the comments on this video, many other people commented something of the same connotations. Now, I'll admit, it's truly unfortunate that the casting directors chose someone as hot as Christian Bale to play a malicious sadist. But ultimately, it is the social culture of social media that allows people to have a skewed perception of themselves, confusing what they find attractive with their actual self-identity. My best friend, the same person that cries at sad cat videos and is too afraid to lie to her parents about literally anything, has somehow tricked herself into believing that she relates to the hot but nevertheless psychopathic Patrick Bateman. It is ultimately the echo chamber of social media that creates a perfect storm of social conditions that completely inhibits a developing identity, putting them in an arrested state where they simply mimic personas fabricated online and tricking themselves into believing that they are genuine and individual.
Now, let's take a walk back down memory lane to retrace as to why we have come lost within ourselves, starting by comparing life before and after social media. Now, social media has expanded onto more and more generations as people begin to grow, and social media becomes not an entertainment platform, but rather an integral part of society. With only 7% of adults being active social media users in 2004 to a staggering 80% of American adults being active on Facebook alone in 2014. These social media users have successfully created a phenomenon where the online world has begun to bleed into the physical world, extrapolating and exaggerating the distance between personal truth and identity. Now, with 3.5 billion people out of our global 7.7 global population being active social media users, we have perpetuated this distance by being stimulated so virtually and so constantly that we crave these social signals that tap into our associativity and therefore associate ourselves with the media's face and the media's words. Now, to put this distance between generations in a more comparable scale, let's compare the outbringing of Generation Z and Generation Alpha. Generation Z is the last generation to have a true comparison in lifestyles with and without social media, whereas Generation Alpha is literally raised in the media, from being posted when they were first born, to their first steps, to even their first achievements. This constant of posting has allowed Generation Alpha to become lost in the media, as Generation Z was able to really, truly experience life before technology, whereas Generation Alpha is stuck in the media. Generation Z is truly lucky enough to be able to grow into the social media and are given choices to do so or exit out of the media. However, Generation Alpha only knows one virtual life. And so they're left with no precedent to aid them in the development and standing of their social positions and statuses within society.
In her book, The End of Forgetting, Growing Up with Social Media, Kate Acorn talks about the relationship between one's past self and one's present self, as the rise of social media works to memorialize one's past self, preventing them from ever really growing away from it. She mentions that the inability to tether oneself away from their past can induce identity crises, as they feel trapped and confined to this past version of themselves. This is an especially alarming concern for the upcoming generations, such as Generation Alpha, as they were never given the chance to develop an identity independent from the internet, and are now not given the chance to separate themselves from their past, which can often be detrimental to the long-term authenticity and self-identities.
So, from the rise of aesthetics to the formation of parasocial relationships, social media has effectively and successfully created an environment that stymies the crucial stages of self-exploration and discovery in a teenager's coming-of-age years. Now, as the influence of social media increases, so does the prevalence of the teenage identity crisis. And as trends come and go, so does the association of a teenager's identity. successfully creating a push and pull relationship between conforming to trendy aesthetics and conforming to our true intentions and ideas.
Rather than creating an identity based on experiential memories, we hover over periods of identity trials provoked through mass media, leading to a never-found sense of stability in how we define ourselves. So now, as we ask ourselves who we are, let's really reflect and think whether we reflect popular culture, or are we really a product of our real self-discovery journeys?